You are now underwater, 140 feet deep, participating in an historic find near Lloyd, Florida. You are following a team of divers in a newly discovered major waterway of Florida's aquifer. This underwater cave, starting at Bird Sink in Leon County, is one of 5 around Lloyd that travel through thousands of feet of limestone. The waterway begins as surface runoff in South Georgia, then plunges underground at Bird Sink, where it twists and turns its way south toward the Wassissa Springs and river. This delicate environment is your local, God-given share of our primary water supply, the vast, nourishing aquifers that extend underground throughout Florida, supporting our economy and our way of life with clean, fresh water. But today, this system is threatened by a proposed gasoline tank farm and pipeline project. Citizens in our community who want to protect our rapidly diminishing clean water supply oppose this and similar projects. The Friends of the Aquifer produced this documentary to show you what is at stake for everyone. Nature stores Florida's fresh water primarily in underground aquifers, which are extensive and in most places only a few feet from the surface, readily available to anyone who can drill a well. But how did that water get there? Rainfall, as it flows through recharge areas, runs across the ground in streams, creeks, and brooks, and gradually filters down into the earth. Runoff also flows directly into the ground through swallow holes, such as Bird Sink. All the water causes the limestone bedrock beneath our feet to be like Swiss cheese. Over time, the water dissolves away the limestone, forming tunnels and caves which scientists, adventurers, researchers, and photographers have explored for more than 15 years. Our aquifers flow toward the estuaries of the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, where they nourish our coastal marine environment. The natural openings directly into the aquifer, like Bird Sink, are called siphons or swallow holes because they do just that. They are critical entry points, swallowing huge volumes of water quickly. Here is Bird Sink when the stream is running. Sites like this are familiar to many of us. These swallow holes are also the weakest part of nature's water system because runoff from rain carries with it many contaminating materials. Pollutants don't just seep slowly into the ground. The currents sweep and inject the pollutants as they plunge downward. Fortunately, because of the efforts of several North Florida cave divers, we now know much more about what is at stake at Bird Sink. Concerned about the possible effects of the proposed gasoline tank farm and pipeline project, they carried out the Bird Sink probe in November and December of 1990 to understand better how serious a pollution threat it is to Florida's groundwater. The Bird Sink probe was possible due to the prolonged drought that presented a rare opportunity. Instead of the usual dark water, whirlpool, and strong current, the waterway became still and clear. Biologist and exploration leader Tom Morris made the first dive into Bird Sink. What he discovered a mile from the proposed tank farm is astonishing. An amazing passageway as large as the tunnels at Wakulla Springs. Here is an underground river of national significance never before seen by humans. The Bird Sink system makes its way through limestone 120 to 160 feet below the surface, flowing southeast past the tank farm site, crossing under Interstate 10 and the village of Lloyd. The underground passage averages 40 to 50 feet wide and high. A team of a dozen divers explored the cave for nearly a mile from the entrance before heavy rains forced them to stop. It may be years before the water will be this still and clear again. At the farthest point reached, the river branches into many tunnels. Here is plastic debris floating on the ceiling. Here also are large tree trunks swallowed by the sinkhole. And bottles, tires, and other debris pulled into our aquifer by strong currents during past rains. Everywhere there is life in the cave. We found a large population of crayfish who live here entirely in the dark. Florida has designated them a species of special concern because we know so little about them. Catfish are abundant. As are eels, like this one near the end of the log. Eels swim from the Gulf of Mexico up the Wassissa River, then live their mature lives underground. 1,000 feet into this system from Bird Sink, a feeder tunnel 20 feet across joins the main tunnel from the north. A 1,000 feet beyond that, another joins it, adding to the flow of fresh water. The volume of water is immense, with a peak flow that could supply a small city. Maps show how the proposed pipeline and tank farm relate to this discovery at Bird Sink and the regional water system. The pipeline will slash directly through the key recharge areas in Leon and Jefferson counties, ending with a tank farm on a hill bracketed by 4 sinkholes. All of them are vulnerable to gasoline leaks and spills in surface runoff, or seepage through surface soils. From the point where the mile-long Bird Sink probe ended, the tunnel system flows southeast, where several miles farther, the Wassissa Springs Group surfaces through a dozen flowing vents to form one of Florida's few unspoiled rivers. Nearby, the St. Marks River springs from the ground, joins the Wakulla River, and flows to the Gulf. From Bird Sink to the Wassissa is an area of rapid population growth as Tallahassee expands eastward. Residents and farmers in this area depend on well water drawn from this aquifer. Gasoline spills would take years to clean up and jeopardize our quality of life. Contamination would also affect the river and coastal waters. Spills do happen from both pipelines and storage tanks. We all know that. We read of these events in newspapers almost every day. Because of this, Florida's fresh water supply requires special protection from petroleum pollution. Yet Florida does not provide such protection. In fact, many planned projects directly threaten our groundwater today. These oil companies chose to build a tank farm in the only high recharge area in Jefferson County, supplying it by a high-pressure underground pipeline from Georgia. the route crosses through 20 miles of Leon and Jefferson County's most important terrain of streams, lakes, and wetlands. Uphill and less than a mile from Bird Sink, Texaco and Colonial Pipeline plan to build a 6.5 million gallon tank farm and pipeline in Lloyd, with more tank farms to follow there later, until we could have this. The history of the oil industry tells us that the Lloyd project, and any similar project, will pollute. This tank farm fire in Jacksonville burned for days and dumped millions of gallons of gasoline-contaminated water into the St. Johns River in 1984. Out of 76 petroleum tank farms in Florida today, 60 have reported contamination problems. More than one pipeline spill happens every day nationwide, each one releasing an average of 5,000 gallons of petroleum. Pipelines account for 15% of all petroleum pollution in the United States. When pollution does occur, it's you and I who will ultimately pay, and pay dearly for any mistakes or accidents that happened. We want to totally avoid anyone contaminating our fresh water. What will we trade for all of this? Have a good long drink of pure cold water, or go fishing, or wash your child, and then speak up.